The auction stopped when he did the unthinkable for the wild alien. The air in the bazaar felt like static before a storm, heavy, charged, and humming with the pulse of too many species in too small a space. On Caltheron Prime, the Grand Market Dome was the largest in 3 systems. Its ceiling was a patchwork of glass and alloy, and through it the twin suns bled pale gold and crimson light across the trading floor. Vendors shouted in dozens of tongues. The smell was a dizzying cocktail of engine coolant, fried kelver pods, and something sharp and metallic that clung to the back of the throat. Ethan Cole had been here before, but never for this. He'd come for salvage parts, maybe a few rare mineral samples, not to watch a living being sold like freight. The crowd shifted toward the central platform, where a raised dais glowed under spotlights. That was where the high-value lots were shown off. Usually it was exotic tech, weapon prototypes, or rare fauna. But today the air was different. The noise dulled to a low, eager murmur. Traders, mercenaries, and aristocrats pressed in close, some with data slates in hand, ready to bid. Then she stepped into the light. She wasn't shackled, but a thin, energy collar ringed her throat, humming faintly. Her skin was a shade of blue so vivid it looked unreal, like crushed lapis lit from within. White hair spilled over her shoulders in a silky cascade, catching the sun's light with ghostly glints. She wore nothing resembling the garb of any known culture, just strips of cloth and leather that looked more like battlefield salvage than clothing. Her eyes scanned the crowd, not with fear, but with the defiant calm of someone who'd already lost everything worth fearing for. The auctioneer, a tall insectoid with chitin polished to a mirror sheen, clicked into a universal translator. Lot 42. Female of unknown origin. Estimated prime age. Physical capacity exceeds human baseline by 87%. Neural scans inconclusive. Designated unbonded. Bidding begins at. Ethan's jaw tightened. Around him, whispers sparked like dry brush fire. She's feral. Dangerous. They say she killed 3 handlers. The auctioneer continued, voice oily. Starting at 10,000 credits. No hands went up. She stood there, back straight, gaze hard, like the auction itself was beneath her notice. That only seemed to make the crowd more hesitant. Traders shifted uncomfortably. A few laughed nervously. No one wanted a fight they couldn't control. 15 seconds passed. Still no bids. Ethan felt something. Not sympathy exactly, not attraction, but a sharp pull in his chest. Maybe it was the way she didn't plead. Maybe it was because every instinct screamed that once the auctioneer declared, no sale, she'd disappear into the kind of hands no one came back from. The auctioneer's antennae twitched in irritation. No bids? Very well, we will. Ethan raised his hand. The gesture cut the air like a gunshot. Conversations broke off midword. Heads turned. Even the security drones pivoted toward him. A slow ripple went through the crowd. You gotta be kidding. Human, you don't know what you're doing. Ethan ignored them. His voice was steady when he said, 10,000. The insectoid clicked sharply. Do I hear 11? Silence. His hand stayed up. Not shaking. Not coming down. The alien woman's gaze locked on him then, sharp, assessing. It wasn't gratitude. It was something colder, heavier, like she was memorizing him in case she needed to know her enemy later. Sold. The auctioneer barked. The crowd muttered, some laughing, some just watching him with the fascination you give to someone about to crash. Ethan kept his eyes on her as the security drones moved in to transfer custody. Somewhere deep in his gut, the realization hit. He hadn't just bought her. He'd bought whatever storm was coming with her. The rest of the bazaar's noise bled back in. But for Ethan, the world had narrowed to a point. Blue skin, white hair, and eyes that promised his life would never return to what it was 5 minutes ago. Ethan followed the security drones through the market's rear corridors, the noise of the bazaar fading into the echo of metal footsteps and servo motors. The air back here smelled of disinfectant and ozone, cleaner, colder, impersonal. The alien woman walked between 2 drones, her pace steady, not resisting. But she didn't look like someone who had surrendered either. Every movement carried a subtle readiness, as if she could spring into lethal motion at any second. The drone ahead stopped at a reinforced door. A retinal scanner blinked awake, confirming Ethan's ID, then slid the door open to reveal a holding chamber. It was barely bigger than a shipping container. Alloy walls, a bench bolted to the floor, a water dispenser, and a single light strip overhead. No windows. The drone stepped back, leaving her inside. Ethan entered after them, the door sealed with a hiss, and a moment later, the energy collar powered down. The hum in the air died. She rubbed her neck briefly, but didn't look at him. "I'm Ethan Cole," he began, his voice low. "I'm not here to—" "Name," she said, her voice a sharp, melodic accent he didn't recognize. The word wasn't a question so much as an order. "I just told you." "Ethan." Now she looked at him. Her eyes were a deep, liquid silver. "No, not yours. Mine." He hesitated. "I don't know it." A faint, humorless smile touched her lips. "Then you should have asked before you bought me." The words landed heavy. She wasn't wrong. Ethan crouched slightly, so they were closer to eye level. "All right. What should I call you?" For a moment, silence. Then Sarah. It was short, sharp, almost like the sound of a blade leaving its sheath. "Sarah," he repeated, testing it. Her gaze didn't soften. "Why? Why what? Why did you raise your hand?" He could have said a dozen things, some noble, some practical. The truth wasn't neat, because no one else did. Her expression shifted, just a fraction. "That is not a reason to chain yourself to a death mark." Before he could respond, the door slid open again. A human woman in a dark uniform stepped inside, a datapad in her hands. She gave Ethan a curt nod. "Your purchase is processed. She's your legal responsibility now. You'll need to clear her through port security if you plan to leave Caltheron Prime." Ethan signed the datapad without looking at the fine print. The officer handed him a small control chip, the failsafe for the collar. He slipped it into his jacket pocket. When the officer left, Sarah's eyes flicked to the pocket. "Burn that," she said flatly. "Not a good idea." "If you—" "Burn it," she repeated, with a tone that suggested she was used to being obeyed. Ethan didn't answer. They left the holding area together, moving through the winding corridors toward the docking bays. As they walked, Ethan noticed how people glanced at Sarah, then quickly looked away. Not just because of her appearance, though her blue skin and white hair drew stares, but because of something else. A weight she carried, a silent warning that said, "Do not engage." At docking bay 17, his ship waited. A mid-sized freighter, patched in too many places to be pretty, but reliable enough to get him across 3 sectors without breaking down. The ramp clanged under their boots as they boarded. Inside, the air smelled faintly of oil and recycled oxygen. Sarah paused at the threshold, scanning the interior with the quick, precise attention of someone mapping exits and blind spots. "You live here?" she asked. "When I'm not somewhere worse." He motioned toward a small cabin off the main corridor. "That's yours. It's not much, but—" Before he could finish, she stepped inside and closed the door. Ethan stood there for a moment, listening to the faint sound of her moving, drawers opening, the scrape of metal, the thud of something being set down hard. Then silence. He headed for the cockpit. The ship's consoles lit up as he powered systems online. A slow vibration built through the deck as the engines woke. He keyed in departure clearance, his eyes flicking to the security channel. No alerts. Yet, 20 minutes later, they were in orbit, Caltheron Prime shrinking into the black. Sarah emerged from the cabin without a word, standing behind his chair. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the viewport. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Someplace quiet." "There is no quiet for me." Ethan glanced over his shoulder. "Then we'll find the closest thing to it." Her gaze lingered on him for a long moment before she said, "You don't understand. They will come. And when they do, they will not care about you. They will not stop at you." "Who's that?" She turned toward the stars. "The ones who took me from my world. The ones who put me on that platform." Ethan leaned back, crossing his arms. "So, you're telling me I just paid 10,000 credits to paint a target on my ship?" "Yes." No hesitation. A humorless laugh escaped him. "Guess I've made worse investments." Sarah didn't smile. "You don't know the scale of what you've stepped into." "Then tell me." For a moment, he thought she might. Her jaw shifted slightly, like she was weighing something. But instead, she said, "You will see soon enough." The cockpit went quiet except for the low hum of the engines. Ethan didn't press. He'd learned long ago that some truths came out on their own, usually at the worst possible time. Still, he couldn't shake the thought. Whatever Sierra was running from, whatever had brought her to that auction block, it wasn't finished. And now, it had his name on it too. The next 3 hours passed in a tense silence, broken only by the ship's systems murmuring to themselves. Ethan kept the freighter on a steady burn toward a jump gate at the edge of the sector, but his eyes kept flicking to the sensor display. Sierra stayed near the cockpit, her movements controlled, deliberate. She didn't pace, didn't fidget, but her gaze was restless, like she was measuring every star they passed for hidden teeth. On the 4th hour, the proximity alarm chimed. A single tone at first, routine. Then it climbed into a shrill triple beat Ethan had only heard twice before. Both times, things had gone bad fast. "Talk to me," Ethan muttered, leaning over the console. The display bloomed with a contact marker. A small vessel, closing from astern at a speed far above freighter class. Sierra's eyes narrowed at the readout. "That is not a patrol ship." "You sure? Could be a courier." Her voice was like cold iron. "It is not." The transponder scan came back. "No." Whoever was out, there wasn't broadcasting identification. Ethan's stomach sank. "All right, so we got a ghost. They are hunting." "How do you know?" "I know the way predators move." Ethan keyed the comms to a wideband hail. "Unidentified vessel. This is the freighter Blue Nova. You are on an intercept course. State your intent." The response was static at first, then a voice so flat it barely qualified as human. "Stand down your engines and prepare for boarding." Ethan killed the channel and met Sierra's gaze. "Friends of yours." "They are no one's friends." The contact was closing fast. He flicked the drive to full burn, the ship's frame shuddering under the push. The distance held for a few minutes, then began shrinking again. The hunter was faster. Sierra stepped closer to the console, her presence like a shadow at his shoulder. "You cannot outrun them." "Not with that attitude," Ethan said, scanning his options. The NAV plotted a dozen jump vectors, but the nearest gate was still 20 minutes out, and they'd be within weapons range long before that. "They will disable your engines, board your ship, and take me," Sierra said, calm as if reciting a weather report. "Not if we make it hard enough." He yanked open a panel beneath the console, pulling out a batter control stick. "This is going to get rough." The first shot hit like a hammer, the shields flaring bright. Warning lights crawled up the display. "Your ship will not last," Sierra said. Ethan gritted his teeth. "Yeah, well, neither will my mood." He rolled the freighter hard to port, skimming a debris field from some long-dead battle. Rusted hull fragments and frozen chunks of something tumbled past in chaotic arcs. The pursuing ship followed, its sleek frame weaving effortlessly through the wreckage. Sierra's hand shot out, gripping the back of his chair. "They will not stop. Not until—" The second hit came, closer this time, rattling the cabin. Ethan's mind raced. He didn't have the firepower to win. That left one option: trick them. He scanned the debris field, eyes catching on a massive hull plate, jagged edges curling inward like a giant's grasping hand. The space inside was shadowed, deep enough to hide a ship. He cut thrust, the freighter drifting. The hunter closed in fast, confident now. "Hold on," Ethan said, and punched lateral thrusters, sliding the Blue Nova into the hull plate shadow. He killed all active emissions. Engines to idle, lights off, every system but life support down to a whisper. The cockpit dimmed. The hum of the engines faded to silence. They floated in darkness. On the sensors, the hunter's signal slowed, then passed by. No change in course. No sweep back. Just gone. For a few long seconds, Ethan didn't breathe. Then the blip vanished from the scope entirely. Sierra's voice was quiet. "They will be back." "I figured." He brought the systems back online, the hum of power returning like blood to a limb. Sierra turned to face him fully for the first time since the chase began. "They are called the KRYTH. They take what they want. They burn what they leave. If they marked you, they will not forget." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "Then we don't give them a second shot." "You could try," she said, "but you cannot hide forever." He met her gaze, searching for something beneath the unblinking silver. "Then maybe we make them stop looking." Her expression didn't change, but something in her eyes flickered, the first hint of calculation, as if she was reassessing him. "Perhaps," she said, "you are not as naive as I thought." Or maybe I'm just too stubborn to die on schedule. For the first time, the corner of her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but not entirely a rejection of the idea either. They reached the jump gate 30 minutes later. As the freighter slipped into the shimmering vortex, Ethan felt a knot in his chest loosen slightly. But Syrah didn't relax. Her gaze stayed fixed on the swirling light beyond the viewport. They will follow, she murmured. Through gates. Through void. Through anything. Ethan didn't argue. Deep down, he knew she was right. And in some reckless corner of himself, he wondered what it would take to make the KRYTH regret ever putting her on that auction block. The blue nova burst from the jump gate into the black expanse of the Atter's fringe, a sector so empty it might as well have been forgotten by the galaxy. Here, the stars were sharp pinpricks against a velvet void, scattered over an ocean of silence. Ethan exhaled slowly. No signals on scan. Looks like we. The proximity alarm wailed again. Not a slow build this time. A single, blaring tone, sustained. Incoming vessel. Zero warning. No transponder. The contact marker didn't appear ahead or astern. It bloomed right in their blind spot, less than 2 kilometers off the port bow. Ethan's stomach went cold. They jumped in on top of us. Syrah didn't move, didn't even turn her head, but her voice was like steel. KRYTH. The comm crackled to life. You have something that belongs to us. The voice was deep. Gravel rasped through a translator. Surrender the asset, and you may live. Ethan cut the channel. Not how this is going to go. The KRYTH ship moved into view, a predator's silhouette. Its hull was all jagged geometry, black metal swallowing starlight. Along its flanks, faint red veins pulsed, as if the ship itself had a heartbeat. 2 more blips appeared on the sensors, closing fast. Smaller ships. A net tightening. Ethan's hands gripped the controls. I can make a run for the asteroid belt. They will follow, Syrah said. Then we'll lose them in the rocks. Her gaze flicked to the weapons console. You are underarmed for that fight. The KRYTH ship's forward batteries flared, a single beam slicing across space. Not at them, but ahead of them, severing their escape vector with a wall of molten debris. Ethan's options collapsed in an instant. The comm hissed again. Last chance, human. Syrah stepped forward. For the first time, he saw something like hesitation in her posture. If they take me alive, they will not stop at me. They will take what they want from your mind, from your world. Ethan met her eyes. Then we don't let them take you. The KRYTH ships spread out, a formation designed to block every path. Syrah's silver gaze sharpened. There's a way. Let's hear it. She moved to the weapons console, her fingers dancing over controls like she'd done it before. Your ship carries a drive core strong enough to trigger a cascade overload. If we detonate it in close range, the blast will cripple their lead ship. Ethan stared at her. That's suicide. Not if we separate the core and launch it manually. His mind raced. The core was the heart of the Blue Nova. Without it, they'd be dead in space, but still alive if the KRYTH didn't finish them. Even if it works, he said, we'll be floating targets. Her expression was unreadable. Better targets in the dark than in their cages. The KRYTH formation tightened. The lead ship's weapons lit, locking onto their hull. Ethan cursed under his breath. All right, show me what to do. They moved together into the maintenance bay, the hum of the drive vibrating through the deck plates. The core glowed inside its containment cradle, blue-white light pulsing in steady rhythm. Syrah began detaching the stabilizer clamps with quick, precise motions. When the clamps release, we'll have less than 90 seconds before the containment field fails. Ethan grabbed a manual lifter, bracing for the weight. The moment the last clamp disengaged, the core's vibration deepened, a resonant thrum that seemed to settle into his bones. They wrestled the cylinder onto the lifter and moved it to the launch cradle. Ethan keyed in a trajectory, straight for the KRYTH flagship. Back in the cockpit, he brought the ship around, closing the gap to less than a kilometer. The KRYTH didn't fire. They thought they had him. Syrah's hand hovered over the release control. Her gaze found his. When this launches, burn hard for the nearest gravity well. The debris will mask our signature. Ethan gave a tight nod. She hit the release. The core shot away from the Blue Nova, spinning end over end through the void. 30 seconds later, its light began to flare, swelling until it drowned the stars. The explosion was silent in the vacuum, but it hit the KRYTH ship like a hammer from a god. A halo of white fire expanded outward, molten fragments scattering in all directions. The shockwave slammed into the blue nova, rattling her down to the bolts. The two smaller KRYTH ships broke formation, reeling from the blast. Ethan gunned the thrusters, angling for the asteroid belt now lit with debris from the detonation. They plunged into the drifting rocks, weaving between slabs of stone the size of city blocks. Behind them, the KRYTH regrouped, but slower now, cautious. In the shadow of a tumbling asteroid, Ethan cut the engines. The blue nova drifted, silent, hidden. For a long minute, neither of them spoke. Then Sierra said, "You just made an enemy who will never stop hunting you." Ethan leaned back in his seat, breathing hard. "Guess that makes two of us." Her eyes lingered on him, silver in the dim light. Something in her expression had shifted. Not warmth exactly, but recognition. A quiet acknowledgement that whatever came next, they were in it together. Somewhere beyond the asteroids, the KRYTH ships searched. The silence between them felt like the calm before another storm, one that neither of them had seen the full shape of yet. The asteroid belt was a graveyard of frozen stone and ancient shipwrecks, lit only by the pale glimmer of distant suns. The blue nova floated dead in the shadow of a fractured monolith, her hull still scarred from the shockwave of the core detonation. Ethan sat in the pilot's chair, helmet lamp dimmed, watching the passive sensors tick away the minutes. No engine hum, no life support fans louder than a whisper. Even their breath seemed too loud. Sierra stood behind him, hands clasped loosely at her back, eyes fixed on the asteroid field beyond the viewport. She hadn't spoken since they cut the engines, and Ethan wasn't sure if that was discipline or something heavier. "You're sure they didn't see us come in here?" Ethan finally asked. "No one sees the rock they die on," she said quietly. "That's comforting." Her gaze didn't move. "They will search the belt for a while. Then they will expand their net. If they have marked your ship, every port that logs your transponder will report your presence." Ethan rubbed a hand over his face. "So basically we've got a death sentence if we stick to civilized space." "Yes." The word hung in the air. He turned his chair toward her. "Then what's your plan? Because you clearly had some idea before you talked me into turning my ship into a floating brick." Her eyes shifted to him at last. "You assume I had a choice. You sure acted like it." "I acted to live another day. That is all." The answer was too cold, too detached, and Ethan felt a flicker of anger. "You realize I just lost the one thing keeping the ship moving. If I don't get another core, we drift until we starve or suffocate. That blast might have saved us in the short term, but..." She stepped closer, silver gaze cutting into him. "The blast saved more than us. It weakened the KRYTH. It cost them. You think they're used to losing? They are not." Ethan exhaled, leaning back. "So what? We just keep running until they get tired." "They will never tire." Her voice was absolute. "You do not understand what they are. The KRYTH are not a fleet. They are a hunger. They take. They strip worlds to the stone and move on." "Yeah, you've said that before." "No," her tone sharpened. "You have not seen them. I have. I watched the skies of my home burn. I heard the ground cry under their machines. I felt the air turn to poison. My people..." She stopped. A muscle in her jaw twitched. "My people did not last long enough to fight." For a long moment, neither spoke. Ethan turned back to the console. "All right, then what? You want to go on the offensive? Hunt them down? Because if that's the plan, I've got bad news. Without a drive core, we can't hunt anything." Sierra glanced at the NAV display. "There's a place." Ethan's eyebrow rose. "A place? A shipyard. Not on any registry, you know. They strip wrecks and rebuild them into something new. They will have a core that will fit your ship. And the catch." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "They will want something in return." He laughed dryly. "Of course they will." Before she could answer, the sensor board lit up. Faint returns, distant but moving fast. Not KRYTH. The signatures were too irregular. Ethan scanned the readout. "Salvagers. At least 3 ships. Looks like they're sweeping the belt." "Not salvagers," Sierra said, eyes narrowing. "Scavers. I'm guessing that's not a good thing. They take what they find, alive or dead." The contacts were closing. Ethan didn't have engines to outrun them, and firing up what auxiliary power they had left would light them up on sensors like a beacon. He looked at Sierra. Any brilliant ideas? She studied the asteroid they were tucked against. Its outer shell was fractured, hollowed in places by centuries of impacts. Can you maneuver us inside? With thrusters only? Maybe. But if we scrape the hull? Better scrape than boarded. Ethan keyed in a slow, careful burn from the maneuvering jets. The blue Nova drifted forward, sliding along the jagged rock. He eased her through a narrow opening into a cavern, just big enough to swallow the freighter. The asteroid's walls closed around them, blotting out most of the stars. Shadows deepened, thick and cold. They killed the lights again. The only illumination was the faint glow from the control panels. Minutes later, sensor echoes showed the scavers sweeping past, their signals distorted by the rock around them. One lingered closer than the others, its readings spiking as if it were sniffing for power signatures. Ethan's breath slowed. Sierra's silver eyes didn't leave the display. Finally, the scaver moved on. The sensor board went dark again. They waited another half hour before Sierra spoke. You cannot hide like this forever. Sooner or later, you must choose where to go and who to trust. Ethan looked at her, exhaustion creeping into his voice. Right now, you're the only one who knows where we can even get a core. So I guess I'm trusting you by default. She tilted her head slightly. That is not the same as believing me. Maybe not, but it's close enough until we get moving again. For the first time, her voice softened, almost imperceptibly. Then I will get you moving. The asteroid's interior felt like a tomb, cold, silent, and smelling faintly of metal and recycled air. The blue Nova sat anchored to a natural shelf of rock, her systems in low-power mode. Outside, nothing moved except the occasional slow tumble of space, dust across the narrow cave mouth. Ethan stood in the maintenance bay, tools spread across a workbench. Without a drive core, most of the ship's systems were dead weight, but there was plenty else that needed fixing after the blast. A coolant line had ruptured, a stabilizer strut was bent from the shockwave, and the forward shielding array had a scorch mark the size of his torso. Sierra appeared in the doorway, her bare feet silent on the metal deck. You are repairing a ship that cannot move. Ethan didn't look up from the wrench in his hand. I'm repairing a ship that will move. Once we get that core you promised. I did not promise. He shot her a look. You said there's a place. That is not a promise, she said evenly, stepping closer. It is a direction. Whether it is still there is uncertain. That's encouraging. She ignored the sarcasm, crouching beside the bench. Her movements were deliberate, almost predatory, but her gaze was fixed on the mess of wiring he'd been untangling. This line is wrong. Wrong. She reached past him, her long fingers brushing his wrist as she flipped a connector. These two feeds are reversed. You would have overloaded the array. Ethan raised an eyebrow. How do you know that? Her silver eyes met his. You think you're the only one who has flown ships. It was the first personal thing she'd volunteered about herself. A sliver of history, a hint of skill. What kind of ships? He asked. She didn't answer, instead standing and moving toward the main corridor. I'll find food. Ethan watched her go, a dozen questions piling up in his mind. She was guarded to the point of paranoia, but she'd just save him from frying the forward shields without even blinking. A half hour later, he found her in the galley, sitting at the narrow metal table with a ration pack open in front of her. The faint smell of heated protein paste filled the air. She was eating with slow, efficient motions, like someone fueling a machine rather than enjoying a meal. You're not exactly a fan of small talk, are you? He said, dropping into the seat across from her. Small talk wastes breath. She replied without looking up. Yeah, but it also makes long silences less awkward. Her gaze lifted, locking onto his. Are you uncomfortable? Not uncomfortable. Just trying to figure you out. You will not. Ethan leaned back, arms folded. That sounds like a challenge. Her lips twitched, the faintest echo of amusement, before vanishing again. Curiosity can be dangerous. So, can not knowing the person you're stuck on a ship with. For a moment, she studied him as if deciding how much to give away. Finally, she said, my people do not exist anymore. I am the last. The words hit like cold water. What happened? Ethan asked softly. The KRYDH happened. Her voice didn't waver, but something in her eyes did. A flicker of memory. sharp and painful. When they come, there is no strategy that wins. There's only how long you can keep the fire from touching you. And then it does. Ethan was quiet for a moment. You fought them. We all fought. And we all lost. He didn't push for more. There was a weight in her tone that didn't need prying at just yet. Instead, he said, then maybe it's time they lost something back. Syrah's gaze sharpened at that. And what would you take from them, human? Their sense of invincibility. That seemed to land somewhere deep. Not quite belief, but not dismissal either. They spent the next 2 days hidden in the asteroid, rationing power and food. Ethan worked on patching the hull. Syrah moved through the ship like she'd been on it for years, memorizing every compartment, every tool. She didn't ask permission. She didn't need to. One night, in the dim glow of the cockpit's standby lights, Ethan found her standing at the viewport, watching the slow drift of distant stars. You ever think about what's out there? He asked quietly. Her head tilted slightly. Always. I mean, beyond the KRYTH. Beyond war. Her voice was softer this time. There was a time when my people traveled for discovery, for beauty, for what we could learn from other worlds. That is gone now. Maybe it doesn't have to be gone forever. She glanced at him, the faintest trace of something unguarded in her eyes. You believe you can change that? Not me. Us. For a heartbeat, she didn't look away. Then she turned back to the stars. We will see. The asteroid had been their shelter for 3 days. Long enough for Ethan to patch the hull. Long enough for Syrah to map every inch of the blue nova. Too long for either of them to believe the quiet would last. The warning came not from the sensors, but from Syrah herself. She stepped into the cockpit with a stillness that was sharper than any alarm. They're here. Ethan glanced at the display. Nothing. I don't see. They're masking their approach. The KRYDH have learned to hunt without being seen. Even as she spoke, the passive scanner ticked once, twice. Faint distortions in the asteroid shadow line. Not ships exactly, but something moving where nothing should be. Ethan powered up the auxiliary systems. They found us. Syrah's voice was calm, but her eyes had narrowed to silver slits. Then we will not let them take us alive. He didn't like the way she said us. It wasn't melodrama. It was a statement of fact. The distortions grew sharper. 3 contacts, slipping through the asteroid field like predators through kelp. Smaller than the KRYTH flagship they'd crippled, but faster and likely built for one thing: boarding. Ethan's hands moved over the controls, plotting a way out. If we punch the thrusters now, we can clear the belt before. A sharp vibration ran through the deck. The noise wasn't a distant thump, but a metallic scream that echoed in his teeth. Something had latched onto the hull. Syrah was already moving. They are inside. He grabbed the sidearm from under the console and followed her into the corridor. The ship's lights flickered once, then steadied. Backup power holding. Somewhere deep in the blue nova, metal groaned as pressure doors sealed. A section of the port side wall bulged inward, the metal glowing faintly from a cutting torch on the other side. Ethan raised his weapon, breath tight. The bulkhead split with a sound like bones snapping. 3 figures poured through the breach. They weren't fully armored soldiers. They were worse. Skeletal frames wrapped in matte black plating, eyes glowing like embers under their visors. The KRYDH boarding drones moved with insect precision, each carrying a weapon that looked fused into its arm. The first drone turned toward Ethan, arm weapon charging. He fired. The shot punched through its neck joint, and it collapsed in a twitching heap. The other 2 advanced, stepping over the wreck of their comrade. Syrah met them head-on. She moved like liquid steel, a blur of limbs and muscle, her bare feet silent even as her blows landed like sledgehammers. One drone's weapon arm snapped under her grip. She tore it free and used it to slam the machine against the bulkhead, sparks exploding in the dim light. The third drone lunged at her from behind. Ethan fired again, catching in the chest, but the shot only staggered it. Syrah twisted, caught its head between her hands, and with a sharp crack, dropped it to the deck. The fight had lasted less than 30 seconds, but the damage was done. A low, rising whine vibrated through the floor. Syrah's head snapped toward the sound. They have planted a beacon. More will come. Ethan's mind raced. We need to move. Now. They ran to the cockpit. Outside the viewport, the first of the KRYTH hunter ships slid into view, its black hull blotting out the stars. They will fire on the asteroid, Cirrus said, to flush us out. Then we get flushed on our own terms. He slammed the throttle forward. The blue Nova roared to life, engines straining against the tight confines of the asteroid's tunnel. The ship scraped along jagged rock, sparks spraying across the hull. The moment they cleared the opening, the KRYTH ship's weapons lit. The first volley streaked past, missing by meters. The second clipped their aft shields, sending warning sirens screaming through the cockpit. Ethan threw the ship into a dive, weaving between asteroid fragments. Cirrus strapped herself into the co-pilot's seat, her hands already on the targeting controls. I can hit them if you hold them steady. That's the problem. Holding steady means dying steady. Then move like the wind, human. He banked hard, rolling the ship to slip under a spinning boulder. Cirrus' first shot went wide, the plasma bolt vanishing into the void. The second caught the KRYTH ship's forward flank, leaving a scorch but no real damage. They are armored heavier than I thought, she said. Story of my life. The hunter closed in, matching every twist and dive. In the distance, another contact blinked into existence, a second hunter joining the chase. Ethan's eyes flicked to the NAV map. There was only one real option left, and it was bad. I can lose them in the gravity well of that gas giant ahead. But if we get pulled in too far, we burn up, Cirrus finished. Yeah, that. She didn't hesitate. Do it. The blue Nova tore toward the looming blue-green sphere, its swirling storms growing larger with every second. The KRYTH hunters followed, either confident or desperate enough to risk the well themselves. The ship's frame began to tremble as the gravitational pull thickened. Ethan felt the weight settle in his bones. We'll have one shot at a slingshot maneuver. If I miss, you will not miss. Her certainty wasn't comforting. It was a challenge. He angled the ship toward the upper edge of the giant storm belt, the turbulence buffeting them like a giant's hand. The first hunter stayed tight on their tail. The second hesitated at the edge of the well. At the last possible moment, Ethan cut the main engines and let the planet's gravity yank them into a tight, gut-wrenching arc. The hunter behind them couldn't match the curve. Its trajectory pulled it deeper into the storm until the swirling clouds swallowed it whole. The blue Nova shot free of the well, the second hunter too far behind to give chase without risking the same fate. Silence filled the cockpit, broken only by the hum of the engines and the thud of Ethan's heartbeat in his ears. Cirrus looked at him, her silver eyes brighter than he'd ever seen them. You fly like someone who's been chased all his life. He managed a breathless laugh. Maybe I have. And for the first time, she smiled. Not a twitch, not a ghost, but a real, fierce curve of her lips. The blue Nova drifted in the shadow of the gas giant's farthest moon, its systems humming low to avoid detection. The bruising roar of combat had faded, replaced by the quiet pulse of life support and the occasional creak of cooling metal. Ethan leaned back in the pilot's chair, feeling the ache in his shoulders finally catch up to him. His hands still itched from holding the controls too tightly. Out there, somewhere beyond the moon's horizon, the second KRYTH hunter would be combing the system. But for now, they were invisible. Cirrus moved through the cockpit with a different kind of tension. Not the electric readiness of battle, but the coiled stillness of someone processing survival. She had tied her hair back, white strands catching the dim light, her blue skin marked with streaks of oil from the fight in the corridor. You're bleeding, she said, gesturing to his arm. Ethan glanced down. A shallow cut traced along his forearm, probably from the breach. I've had worse. She stepped closer. Infection will kill faster than a wound. Her voice carried no softness, but her hands were precise and almost gentle as she cleaned and sealed the cut with a med spray. The sting was sharp enough to make him wince. When she finished, she didn't step back immediately. Her silver gaze held his for a second too long, as if she were studying the way humans reacted to pain. Then she turned away. We need to repair the port bulkhead, she said. If they follow, that breach will be their way in. He checked the damage report on the console. We can weld a patch from the emergency plates, but the hull stress in that section is bad. We'll need to land somewhere to do it right. Cirrus leaned against the co-pilot's seat, crossing her arms. There's a mining outpost in the Perseid Rim. Small, unregistered. They will trade repairs for whatever is in your hold. Ethan smirked faintly. You're assuming I have anything in the hold worth trading. You have me, she said without hesitation. The words hit him harder than they should have. That's not. She cut him off. The KRYEH value me. Others will too. You know this. He set his jaw. You're not cargo. Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Confusion, maybe, or disbelief. Then why risk your life? Ethan hesitated. The easy answer, because I don't like bullies, didn't feel right anymore. Neither did because it was the right thing to do. Instead, he said, because I couldn't watch them win. Sierra tilted her head slightly, like she was weighing the truth of that. Finally, she nodded. They worked in silence after that, sealing the breach with what scrap they had. Sparks flared in the dim light, throwing brief shadows across the cockpit walls. Every so often, Ethan caught her watching him, but she never said what was on her mind. When the patch was done, he powered up the NAV systems. The Perseid rim was 2 jumps away, far enough to be dangerous, but not impossible. Before setting the course, he turned to her. You sure about this outpost? We don't exactly blend in. A faint smile touched her lips, almost too quick to catch. They will be too busy staring at you to notice me. He chuckled, shaking his head. That's a first. The Blue Nova's engines rumbled back to life, the faint vibration settling into the deck under their feet. Outside the viewport, the moon's pale curve slid away, revealing the stars beyond. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There was no chase, no immediate threat, just the vast cold quiet of space. You've been hunted before, Sierra said suddenly. Ethan didn't look at her. What makes you say that? You move like prey that has survived more than once. He allowed himself a small, humorless smile. Maybe that's why I understand you. Her gaze lingered on him a moment longer. Then she turned her eyes to the stars. As the Blue Nova jumped into FTL, Ethan caught his reflection in the viewport glass. He didn't look like a hero. He looked like a man who had just made himself a permanent enemy of a species that didn't forgive. And yet, he didn't regret it. Not yet. The Perseid Rim outpost was little more than a cluster of aging docking rings bolted onto an asteroid. From a distance, it looked like a rusted spider clinging to a rock, its outer lights flickering in a lazy, uneven pattern. But for Ethan and Sierra, it was the closest thing to safety they'd had since leaving the KRYTH blockade. The docking clamps engaged with a metallic shutter. Inside the Blue Nova, the ship's air felt warmer, thicker, maybe from the recycled Opmo bleeding in from the outpost connection. Ethan powered down the engines, letting the hum fade into a rare stillness. Sierra stood beside him in the cockpit, her arms loosely crossed, her silver eyes fixed on the view ahead. This place smells of desperation, she murmured. He smirked faintly. You can smell that through the bulkhead. Her gaze flicked toward him, but she didn't smile. It is not a scent. It is in the way the hull plating has been patched with whatever scrap they had, in the way the docking codes were 3 years out of date. They have nothing here but what they can take or trade. Ethan leaned back in his chair. Sounds like my kind of people. She gave him a long, unreadable look, then turned toward the hatch. They didn't leave the ship right away. The cargo hold was bare except for the scavenged plating they'd used to patch the breach. If they were going to get real repairs, they'd need something else to offer. And that meant bargaining with information, favors, or dangerous work. That night, they stayed docked but locked down. The outpost's lights filtered faintly through the narrow portholes, painting the interior in dim gold. Ethan sat at the small table in the galley, nursing a cup of stale coffee substitute, while Sierra perched on the bench across from him, watching without touching the food he'd set out. You still think I should trade you for repairs? He asked suddenly. Her gaze didn't waver. I think it would be the most efficient choice. And I think you don't believe that. She tilted her head. Belief is irrelevant. Survival is not. That's where you're wrong, he said quietly. Sometimes belief is the only thing that keeps you moving. Her expression didn't change, but her hands curled slightly on the tabletop, the faintest sign of tension. My people believe the KRYEH could be fought, she said. That belief burned our cities and salted our worlds. I am not sure is worth much. Ethan's jaw tightened. Maybe not, but you're still here. And so am I. That means something. For the first time since he'd met her, she looked away first. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It felt measured, like each was testing the limits of how far they could trust the other. Later, as Ethan did a final systems check before sleeping, he caught sight of her in the cockpit, sitting alone in the pilot's chair. She wasn't looking at the controls or the docking bay outside. She was staring at the stars, not the vast unknown, but a single patch of space, as if something out there had its claws in her memory. He didn't interrupt. Some things weren't ready to be spoken aloud. Instead, he made a quiet promise to himself. Whatever it took, he'd keep the KRYDH from getting anywhere near her again, even if it meant putting himself in their sights forever. 2 weeks later, the Blue Nova slid out of the Perseid-rimmed shadow, its hull patched and reinforced with mismatched plates from half a dozen different ships. She wasn't pretty, but she was stronger than before, and, for now, space-worthy. The work hadn't been free. Ethan had taken a job no sane pilot would have touched, a dead-drop delivery through a nebula crawling with black market sensor buoys. Syrah had backed him up in silence, eyes sharp, movements precise, as if she'd done this kind of dance long before meeting him. When the last credit changed hands and the final weld cooled, they left without saying goodbye to anyone at the outpost. That place had been a stopover, not a home. Now, as the stars stretched in the viewport, Ethan let himself breathe a little easier. Syrah stood beside him, hands resting lightly on the back of the pilot's chair. Her blue skin caught the starlight, and for a moment she seemed carved from the night itself. "They will keep looking for me," she said quietly. "Yeah," he replied. "They will find you too now." He glanced up at her. "I'm counting on it." She blinked, tilting her head slightly. "Why?" "Because it means I matter enough to be noticed." He gave her a crooked grin. "And if I matter, then maybe I can make them regret it." Her lips pressed into a thin line, but he caught the faintest trace of something softer in her gaze. Not gratitude exactly, but recognition. They spent the next few hours in companionable silence. No words could stretch far enough to cover what they'd already been through, and neither seemed eager to test the limits. When the proximity alert chimed, Ethan's shoulders tensed out of instinct. But it wasn't a KRYTH ship this time. Just a lone freighter drifting too far off its lane, transponder silent. He adjusted course without a word. The freighter could be trouble, or it could be nothing. Either way, he wasn't going to leave a fellow drifter in the void without at least taking a look. Syrah stayed in the cockpit as he eased the Blue Nova closer. She didn't question his decision, maybe because she knew, by now, that this was who he was. A man who didn't walk away. A man who raised his hand and never lowered it. If you've ever rooted for an impossible love or a fight worth dying for, subscribe. There are so many more stories like this waiting for you. And drop a comment. Would you risk it all for someone from another world?